A big rebound here in the equity markets, Carol Massar,
Yeah.
though very much heavily weighted towards small and mid-cap stocks.
Yeah, kind of interesting, right, to see that trade. I've been thinking, though, a lot about the energy trade. You had crude oil went down more than 5%. You've seen energy names lower. But what has rallied off of that is your cruise line names, your airline stocks, anybody who taps into the energy market, which is kind of a big line on the balance sheet, that energy cost. They have definitely been benefiting in today's trade.
We're kind of talking our gainers and decliners here, because I got to tell you, kind of tough to find decliners, but look no further than energy to find decliners. The worst performing sector in the S&P 500, all tracking this drop in Brent after those Israeli strikes against targets in Iran avoided those crude facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking as well, with oil prices plunging, how that kind of removes some of the inflation fears that, had taken hold in this market. But I feel like the Fed is kind of the last thing on people's minds, at least for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, they're in a quiet period, so we don't need to worry too much about them. But this is kind of the 1-2 punch, right? I mean, 1-2-3 punch, if you will, here with earnings really heating up this week, the busiest week of earnings. That's going to be followed by more earnings next week, the election, then, of course, the Fed decision on a week from Thursday.
It's a lot coming out of investors. 42%, right, of the S&P 500's market cap coming your way in regards to earnings. So it's a big one this week.
Absolutely. And we get the closing bells here. In New York, you can take a look there at Walmart actually ringing the bell there on the NYSE floor with stocks pretty much green across the screen here. We're up about 0.3% right now on the S&P 500, about 0.7% on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, while the NASDAQ Composite holding on to the gains of about 0.25%. We should just point out the NASDAQ 100 right now looks like it's going to close out the day unchanged after spending a good portion of the session in the green. But let's go to your outperformers on the day. That includes Dow Transports up 1%. S&P 400 mid-caps up 1%, and the Russell 2000 up 1.6.
All right, going back to the large caps, the big caps, the S&P 500, most names in the index higher today, guys. 355 to be exact, 148 to the downside, Scarlet.
All right, let's take a look at the industry groups. You have 9 out of 11 groups in the green, so a lot of green on that pie there. Financials leading the way, gaining more than 1%. Materials and utilities are the next best performers, and the red spot there really belongs to energy, down 2/3% as oil prices tumble, and tech slightly down.
All right, guys, to the individual gainers we go, and taking a look at Trump Media and Technology Group, up pretty much closing just off its highs of the session, up more than 21%, extending a 5-week surge that has put the stock up some 270% from a September 26th low. We had a lot of retail traders out there touting the shares, betting markets like Polymarket on Trump returning to the White House, and so those increased odds. There's a lot of conversation, certainly on social media, and as I said, the retail trade, so really pushing that name up. We mentioned the pullback in terms of oil prices, and so you've seen a lot of travel names, transportation names higher in today's session. That included Carnival Cruise, up nearly 5% in today's session. And then I do want to just mention Dow Jones Transports, because you had most names in the index higher today. The index overall up about 1.2%. Quick check here on the index, and you had 16 of the 20 names higher in today's session, again, as we've seen that restrained response from Israel against Iran, and that has put some pressure on energy prices.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the decliners, including energy companies. I'll get to those in just a second. But starting with Boeing, shares fell after the company launched nearly $19 billion share sale. It's one of the largest ever by a public company, offering to sell 90 million common shares and about $5 billion of depository shares. That's according to a statement that came out today. The common share portion alone would total just under $14 billion. Shares of Boeing falling today by 2.8%. Could raise up to about $22 billion, according to Bloomberg calculations. And on to one of the energy companies I want to focus on, APA Corporation falling 4.5% today. We mentioned why oil fell. We saw oil companies move as a result of that. The S&P 500 Energy Index dropping as much as 1.9% in the session, hitting its lowest level since October 1st. It was the worst performing, as Scarlett mentioned, of the 11 sectors in the market. APA led those declines today, falling 4.5%. And finally, GE Healthcare Technology today fell 2.8%. We saw weakness as a result of Philips shares plunging the most intraday since September of 1998. The medical tech firm reported third quarter sales that missed expectations. It also lowered its comp sales forecast for the year. We saw GE Health shares fall in sympathy there.
All right, let's take a quick look at yields up again for another day here. Fifth session in the past 6, where we've seen yields move higher, defying a lot of expectations that we were going to see a much more meaningful drop. In fact, on that benchmark 10-year yield of 3 basis points today to 4.27, that's the highest level going back to late July. Similar story for your 2-year yield, up about 2 to 3 basis points on the day, but again at 4.129 and change. That's the highest level since at least August 1st here, and that is the trajectory right now, and it's a big part of the reason why we kicked off the close here on Bloomberg Television a little bit earlier with a big focus on those Treasury yields and Treasury borrowing.
All right, guys, as we wait for some earnings after the close today, I want to get to one that's going to actually report earnings tomorrow. We're talking about Crocs. This one has been on a tear this year, up about 48%. Well, you know, what's interesting is, as this company has focused on a younger generation to wear their shoes, it turns out schools are kind of pushing back, and they're starting to ban. Dozens of schools in at least 12 U.S. states have forbidden students from wearing Crocs in their day-to-day use, and their concerns are that students are tripping and falling.
It's not just tripping and falling. Other schools have say the shoes have led to a rise in accidents and distractions, students playing with the little charms that go with the shoes in class. They have thrown shoes at classmates
What?
before.
I'm sorry, this is separate from Crocs now at this point then, right?
No, I mean, I think you'd throw a Croc because maybe it wouldn't hurt as bad if it hit you. But
again,
there's
bigger
also,
issues.
There's also
issues is right.
Julia Fenzeris wrote this story. It's a great piece. There's a scary anecdote in here about a young person actually getting a shoe stuck in an escalator.
Ooh.
And then getting a pretty severe injury as a result of that. I don't know if you guys are.
That
Are
could
you guys
happen
wearing?
with a lot of shoes, though. A shoelace could get caught.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't understand, though. Is this different from just regular shoes?
Yeah, the argument from these school nurses is that they're not as safe as a traditional regular shoe.
Okay.
Yeah, not as safe as, the New
I
Balance.
feel like this is the 2024 version of when I wasn't allowed to wear Keds sneakers during gym class because everyone took out the laces and it wasn't really a sneaker.
Well, and I guess if you don't put the strap on the back, I remember, I think, clogs being banned, like in grade school or something, because people were tripping and falling or something.
They call it the safety strap, Carol.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just thought it was interesting that there's a safety strap on a Crocs.
Maybe there's a problem to begin with. I'm just going to say.
All right, we do have some breaking news here. Let's just start off here with Ross Stores as we wait for earnings across the wire on forward. A new CEO over at that company. We knew they were looking. They've now found one. James Conroy is going to be the new CEO at Ross Stores. That's just crossing the wire right now. This will take effect on February 2nd of next year as Barbara Rentler steps down.
Boot Barn Holdings CEO. He's coming from Boot Barn, so he's stepping down from Boot Barn, going over to Ross Stores.
Can you say that again?
I said it once. That's enough.
Boot Barn.
Boot Barn. Yeah.
Boot Barn. All right, what do you guys got for us?
There's a story about, hold on, let me just pull it up because it was a really good one, about JP Morgan warning people that there's going to be a water shortage because of AI power demand. Obviously, to keep data centers cool, you need a lot of water, and that is going to collide with less reliable precipitation patterns due to climate change. If you're in the East Coast or in the New York area, it hasn't rained here for almost a month, which is kind of unusual for this time of the year.
Makes me feel like we're home. Makes me feel like California.
Oh, yeah.
I've been wondering.
For better, for worse.
Yeah. Here's a stat. Large data centers can use as much as 5 million gallons of water a day. That's a lot.
All right, let's get to earnings here, as quite a few are crossing the wires that we need to get to. VF Corp, the owner of North Face, reporting operating income in the most recent quarter on an adjusted basis of roughly about $273.9 million. That's above street estimates of $219.5 million. And the company also saying that its revenue from continuing ops basically coming in right in line with estimates. EPS also a slight beat. The shares higher, Carol, up about 3%.
All right, guys, let's get to another one crossing Cadence Design, and let's get right to the outlook. Fiscal year adjusted EPS of $5.80 to $5.93. That is it had seen $5.77 to $5.97. Fiscal year revenue $4.61 to $4.65. It had seen $4.6 to $4.66 billion. And I'm just taking a look. Stock investors seem to like it, at least at first blush. Stock is up about 8.6% here in the aftermarket.
All right, I'm looking at shares of Ford, which are bouncing around but higher in the after hours. The company sees fiscal year adjusted EBIT coming in at $10 billion. They saw it from $10 billion to $12 billion. The estimate was for 10.6, so that came in a little light. Third quarter adjusted EPS, though, coming in line with expectations at 49 cents. Shares now down about 1%.
And this is a stock that's fallen almost 10% this year. And since its last earnings, down 18% because of that higher than expected unexpected surge in warranty costs. A lot of eyeballs on whether it's going to turn things around on that side. Another headline that just crossed in terms of its outlook for Ford Blue, which is its traditional ICE vehicles. EBITDA will be $5 billion for the full year. It had seen $6 to $6.5 billion. So that is a downgrade on its outlook for its biggest business.
And it's kind of interesting, too. I mean, just real quickly, guys, because there's a lot in this here, and they really do talk about this idea of cost controls as that being the big driver going forward for what those earnings are going to look like. The company saying that it has a lot to share, not just in the release, but on that conference call as well. We're going to continue our coverage on Bloomberg Television in just a minute.
Yeah, and that forecast in particular, Romaine, dragging down the stock down about 4% here in the aftermarket. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.